said, like a country club where they kind of hold the line. There's a saying called hold the line, is a saying of holding the line of real estate into those historical groups or those historical overlays. And the big factor about it is Fairmount is made up of single family homes. Totally understand a historical group or area that says, okay, we want to keep historical looking homes. But my real estate is a multifamily apartment complex. Under the definitions of Texas law, it's residential under the utilities and everything like that, but it is a commercial viable business. And therefore, when I went to Fort Worth, they knew that the people that are suffering the most are not me, because I don't live on my property. My tenants are the ones that are suffering the most, because I'm trying to make the property a better property for tenants.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential. Homeowners associations, or HOAs. Some people like living in a neighborhood that has an HOA because it ensures that the neighborhood keeps the same look and feel, while others don't want to be told what to do with their property. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of HOAs. In Texas, if someone buys a piece of property located in an HOA, they legally must be made aware of it. In the city of Fort Worth, Texas, a developer bought a piece of property which wasn't in an HOA, but might as well have been, because the property was zoned under a historical overlay. Now, because it was zoned like this, he can't make energy efficiency improvements to the property, which means tenants are having to pay more in energy costs. So what qualified this piece of property to have a historical overlay, and who put it in place? I want to welcome Stephen Chacko to the show to share his story of the barriers he's facing with his property. Stephen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Okay, first of all, I have to, because I've spent a lot of time in DC. I can't say I've spent a lot of time in bars in DC, but you bartended in Washington, DC for 20 years?
Yes, I was in DC for 20 years. I had a house there right by American University. I used to rent my rooms out to American University law students. And yeah, it was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I learned all about the ins and outs of government, good and bad.
I imagine a bartender in Washington, DC might actually know a few secrets that go on in DC, probably, right?
Right. Especially when you work in fine dining, and I was waiting tables in a very high-end fine dining restaurant. And oh yeah, I know a lot of different secrets. Absolutely.
Bartenders probably know tons of secrets, no matter if you're in DC or somewhere else. I'm sure you know a lot of secrets, but you probably learned how to communicate with people, talk to people, probably learned a lot about making deals, right? Real estate deals and stuff by doing that.
Absolutely. It was an incredible experience. I learned about the value of wealth. But really my inspiration before that was my own father, who was a Christian minister, who wanted to make extra income. And he was able to make extra income, supplemental income, by doing real estate. And that's where I learned a lot from.
It's great. So yeah, talk about your family and how you ended up being a developer.
So yeah, my dad, as a Christian minister, I always joked with my father. I always wished that we were, I guess, TV evangelists and fly around in a private jet everywhere. But we didn't grow up that way. And my dad did not want to take any extra income from the church. So my dad learned to do real estate, and he made supplemental income that way. That was enough to improve our quality of life for our whole family. And today we have a nice over 200 acre ranch out in East Texas, completely paid off. I learned that from my father. We bought real estate development properties, cash. We're old school. We bought it with our own money. Never got really worried about getting a loan. And from that, when I was in DC, I came back and visited a friend of mine, and I found this property with a friend that wanted to buy that. And I used my family, and we bought it cash.
Interesting. Well, and so you kind of learned from your dad about how to do it and then kind of followed him into that business, right?
Yeah, very
Right.
much so. I think the biggest value of my father being a Christian minister was the value of talking to people and connecting.
Yeah.
And that was a huge value that gave me the value into my community. And I have been, I believe without a doubt, I've been an inspirational part of my community, especially in the street that my business is located.
Right. Well, let's talk about the history of the neighborhood where this property is located. Tell us about that.
So the street is called Hemp Hill. Hemp Hill used to be the main street out of Fort Worth. It was a way toward Waco. Fort Worth was a very industrious town. The cattle business, oil business, everything is there. When Hemp Hill was developing, there were neighborhoods that were all along there that were very wealthy neighborhoods, all the way down. There's Ryan Place, there's Elizabeth Boulevard, very high-end homes that were at the time in the 1920s. My property built in 1920, and other properties around there, the older properties that were in a very established neighborhoods, that was kind of the wealthy area of Fort Worth. And so my apartments was considered the high-end living in Fort Worth.
Gotcha. So now you purchased this property. When you bought the property, were you told about it? Were you made aware that it had a historical overlay on it?
No, not at all. I bought it, and I knew that it was older. We knew that it had amazing bones to it, and good, solid property. Nothing was caving in. The owner was distressed, so my main thing was, let me work with the city, get everything up to code. Let's get everything correct. There was a lot of violations on the property, and I worked with the city code department, and I brought it up to speed. So that was the biggest thing about trust, was going to them and saying, I'm not going to be like the previous owner. I'm going to be different.
So let's talk about this historical overlay. What does it mean to have a historical overlay?
First time I knew about it was a lady was driving by the property, and I was outside working on it. And a lady pulled over and says, "Oh, do you know that your property is part of Fairmount Historical District?" I said I had no clue. I didn't know what that meant. All I knew was fixing up the apartments, making the tenants right, taking care of them first, and which I did. The issue of the historical overlay did not come into effect to me until I had some income that was enough to utilize to do any development. And that was my goal. I did not realize that there were other pieces around the property that were not mine that I had to buy. And I had to go on that quest of finding those pieces of property and buying that to make a full acre of development on my real estate play. So it's just like a real estate, like any financial model, you were going to do a financial real estate play of development. And that was my ultimate goal on this property. But yeah, the other pieces of property was another address next door that was also zoned multifamily that had no historical overlay. And that's when I realized, wow, this is a little bit incongruent. And is the city aware of it? And that's when I went to the city to make them aware of it, and they were aware of it. But then I realized that I was going against a brick wall of not really wanting to work with me to get it accomplished. So I know the legal strategies, and so I went to their vendor. That is, the city of Fort Worth has a vendor that does historical rewrites, and that group is in Austin. I talked to that vendor in Austin. They agreed the incongruent nature of the properties because of the commercial viability of the street. And we knew the future use was mixed use, which is a huge, better development, brand new, better quality development, and gives me as a developer equity strategy almost triples my equity if I do mixed use. And so they knew what my hardships and economic hardships would have been. And the vendor agreed that it needed to be changed. Then the vendor did not want me on the call with historical. That's when I knew there was something up. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would you not want me on the call? Because you know I'm right. You know it's economically a zigzag of historical, non-historical on our street. That's an economic hardship for bankers, developers, insurance, everything. And so everybody knows it's an economic hardship. But she was very insistent, no, let me talk to historical and see how they feel about it. And that's when I was like, I was really upset, but I kind of said, okay, let me trust her. And, at my mistake, she called and didn't call me back for almost a month. And then I had to reach out to her and find out that historical Fort Worth was not even willing to look at the matter. And that was extremely hard for me because my faith in Fort Worth and the great people that work for Fort Worth, which are phenomenal. There's some 99% of the people that work in the city of Fort Worth are phenomenal. They're looking out for you. But there's a small sliver of a group that I call the executive branch of the city that are internal staff that are not accountable, not electable. They're the ones that are really the economic engine, and the economic hardships. What I call them the word, what I call is a kind of country club group of, if you're not with us in our world, then you're not out. You're out of our world. And so that's what I felt. And then of course I reached out. I did my due diligence. I reached out to historical, made sure that they knew that I knew about the call with the vendor, and they went on Zoom call with them, and they were not willing to change. And that was extremely, again, difficult, because here I am going to lenders and trying to get everything done in one shot with all my real estate development. Mm-hmm. So that was economically a hardship. Yeah.
So if you buy a property and it has, an easement on it, or it's got a lien on it or something, I mean, about that. Why in the world would this have happened where you didn't know about this? Isn't it kind of like a lien? It should be something similar to that.
I think nobody knows until you go to try to do some work on it and you want to do the right thing and pull permits.
Yeah.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
Even if you had there's a whole department called Historic Fort Worth Department with the city. Mm-hmm. That city represents historical Fort Worth. That city represents my real estate. But their value is, they're almost like a country club where they kind of hold the line. There's a saying called hold the line, is a saying of holding the line of real estate into those historical groups or those historical overlays. And the big factor about it is Fairmount is made up of single family homes. Totally understand a historical group or area that says, okay, we want to keep historical looking homes. But my real estate is a multifamily apartment complex. Under the definitions of Texas law, it's residential under the utilities and everything like that, but it is a commercial viable business. And therefore, when I went to Fort Worth, they knew that the people that are suffering the most are not me, because I don't live on my property. My tenants are the ones that are suffering the most, because I'm trying to make the property a better property for tenants.
Mm-hmm. So it would seem to me that if they're going to do this, don't they? It seemed to me they have an obligation to let the properties, or at least future buyers of these properties, know that they're controlled, or have to be complying with these historical overlays. Do they not see that there's some responsibility on their part to do that?
I think they knew, especially when I reached out to their vendor, which was a play by me as a real estate developer. Mm-hmm. I kind of knew how to go around it. Because of the beginning of the feeling of I'm going to have resistance, I knew I had to get a legal strategy ready. And that's why I reached out to that vendor. I made sure that that vendor knew what was going on and they agreed. So when I had that approved, that's when I said, hey, Fort Worth, you are responsible as much as I am for my development because I am having economic hardships. Let me give you an example. The property to get insurance, there's a thing that you think you're going to go get an insurance agent to give you insurance. This property built in 1920 that has not been, let's say, brought up to the regular standards like a regular property, like you tear down a new construction. You have the only insurance you probably can get is called a surplus line policy. That policy group in Texas, you think every insurance is under the Department of Insurance in Texas. That policy, surplus line policy, is not under the policies of Texas. Then that means Texas Department of Insurance does not regulate surplus line policies. So that's the reason why when you have historical properties or hardship properties or properties really hard to get insured in the proper method, there's this other group out there, but they're not regulated. So when the insurance agent, for example, did not start the insurance, there's nothing I can do except go hire a lawyer versus go to Texas Department of Insurance. That's only because, again, the property is not up to a standard that normal properties and real estate should be under to get the proper insurance.
Right, right. Now, who's involved in which properties go under this historical overlay? Who decides that?
Great question. In 1990, I did my research. In 1990, and this goes back to the Fair Housing Act. And the Fair Housing Act occurred and in 1963 or 68, I believe. But in 1988, it started getting more teeth into legality throughout the United States. Historic districts started coming to the development services and said, hey, we want to kind of control our real estate area. We look at it, we see some kind of feel to it. So it has older virtues. Let's keep this let's create a historic district. And that's what started happening to a lot of real estate in the United States was historic districts started popping up. And this group was a neighborhood of non-economic developers or non-economic accountants to the way the city should have approached the real estate. They allowed a group to go in and look at properties and say, oh, that's built in 1920. That looks like something that we can contribute to our historic district. That was wrong in every aspect because our street is not a regular street. Our street is a commercially viable street where businesses and everything thrives. It's a main artery in Fort Worth. So when they allowed one property in and not the whole street, in other words, did not make it congruent, that was an economic hardship. And there's no doubt about it. Fort Worth Economics knows multiple times they've known about this problem. And I think it's been tried and true to get it addressed, but I don't think anybody had the muscle or the power to go all the way and say, hey, this is wrong.
Mm-hmm. So is there a board that oversees, is it a historical board or what?
So the Fairmount Historical District is made up of a neighborhood of single-family homeowners, not commercial viable business owners. Mm-hmm. And that is the problem. Their understanding of coming around to look at the property, just do this, just do that, is their understanding of look and feel. They don't understand the viability of a commercial property or a commercial viable property to give back to tenants a good quality product. I'll give you a great example. We had these vestibules, which are basically stairwells to get into the doors of the apartments. That whole staircase to get in is almost a 600, 700 square foot space. I'm in the process with a architect of redesigning the whole thing. And when I do that, the whole historic tax breaks that you get, nope, that goes away because I'm moving the property into a better quality product. Think about it. the staircases by Texas law have to be unlocked to get to the front door of the apartments. By Texas law, those have to be unlocked. So imagine the people that are coming in there and sleeping overnight without my permission.
Right.
And imagine a single family mother with a daughter that got followed home by a person and was creating a sexual act in the stairwell when she looked out the people. That's what happened to my property.
Wow.
And she immediately called me and I said, and she crying and said, I got to move. And I immediately gave her a deposit back and the prorated rent right back to her. That's the problem that we face.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you another problem. I cannot put a fence up past my hip because that's the issue with the historical overlay. They say that the fence has to be under their historical guidelines. Their historical guidelines are not about protecting the property. Their historical guidelines is look and feel.
Mm-hmm.
So my biggest question always to anybody historic, what matters more, the look and feel of a property or the human condition within the property? What matters more?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem that we face for properties like mine or developers like myself.
Yeah. And you're still protecting the property from a historical standpoint, right? I mean, there's nothing you're wanting to do that would diminish the historical significance of the property.
Correct. So when you talk to Fort Worth Historic, they have these certain things called tax consultants, historic tax consultants.
Uh-huh.
They'll say you can redeem 45% of your cost for development. That's completely false. They don't have anybody on staff. So therefore, you have to call an outside consultant. And then you give them your plans about doing a better quality product, such as putting the staircases on the courtyard to the front door of the property. Nope, we don't like that. That doesn't fit into our tax consulting way of doing things. So you're making improvements on the property where you need to leave it the same. And that's the problem that we face as historical developers. There are properties where kids in a bedroom are literally waking up and hitting their head on the side of the roof. And it's only done because historical overlay or historic properties are facing that challenge by the city saying that you can't touch it. You can't change the exterior. You must leave it like that. You must leave that roof like that. Because when they drive by, they want to think, look and feel, oh, it looks so good. It looks so historic. That matters more to the Fort Worth Historic Board than anything else. Not me building a better product. My ultimate goal was actually, when I bought all the land around it, to tear this property down. Because I knew the future use of the street is mixed use. That triples or quadruples my value. And I have a right to develop that. That's the future use. But because of my historical overlay on one piece of my property, I cannot touch it. And that was told to me by planning development department. That was told me by historic. And then I'm trying to keep within those parameters until I go to the legal fight, which I believe it will eventually be a legal fight.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, aside from not being able to tear the property down, there's all these other things like the fence and the entryway and things like that they're preventing you from doing. I mean, are there other issues that you'd like to change, but you're not allowed to?
Right. So, for example, the windows. I pushed through with the architect about redesigning the interior and making more value to the property. But the windows, I'm getting clapback from Historic Fort Worth, which, by the way, let me repeat, there are great people within Fort Worth. Great people, phenomenal quality people. But they're holding on to a policy that in my interpretation is racist, 100% racist. Because the value of the real estate for me is giving back a quality product to better tenants. So when I develop it, I get a better quality rent. When the City of Fort Worth Historic Group, Fort Worth Historic Department tells me I must keep wood windows, the wood windows in the property I must keep or try to fix. First of all, a wood window is not efficient. No matter how good you make it look, no matter how great you might think it's going to look, be rehabbed, No wood window is ever efficient. End of story. That is an absolute falsehood that they will project. The historical overlay of the property can look like a wood window by the exterior. But for them to tell me to keep a wood window gives an economic hardship, not just me, to my tenants. Think about that. A tenant across the street that has a vinyl window will pay a less electricity bill than a person with a wood window. Then now think about after I put $4.5 million into my development, and when somebody rents, how long will I keep a quality tenant before the tenants start going down? Because guess what? They're at higher electricity bill. I got to keep a lower rent. That doesn't help me out at all.
Right. Now, you've tried to get the historical overlay removed, but you haven't been successful in that as of yet. What's the reason to keep it on your property? What do they say?
They say they're not in the mood, or they're not in their state of mind to do it. That's their saying. And we have it on Zoom. We have it on Zoom, by the way. It's recorded on Zoom by them, so we can go back and look at that transcript. That is 100%. It was a wrong move by Fort Worth, and they know it. Their issue is this neighborhood is established. You're a contributing property to that neighborhood. You must keep it under that overlay. That's not the way development should work. And so, again, the people are great within Fort Worth Historic Department, but they are under a false policy of economic hardships, and especially toward our street, that we are trying to develop and make a better quality product for the whole street. And that also goes back to what happened during COVID. And I'll really quickly give you an insight about COVID. When COVID happened, we were, Texas suspended the Open Meetings Act of in-person meetings. What then occurred was Fort Worth Development Services in a group, our neighborhood president, tried to rezone all of our streets under an urban design standard. And that was during a time when minorities, most of my business owners on my street are minority business owners, such as myself. They were not aware of how to do Zoom. Zoom was a new thing, and they were not aware how to go online and talk to anybody. So they were used to the in-person meetings that were suspended. And they kept pushing that rezoning after I asked them to stop the rezoning till after COVID was over with. They've refused. That really inspired me. And so I went and got 260 petitions signed, including Kay Granger's son, Congresswoman Kay Granger's son, signed my petition. So I got the petition signed. I went in front of those Zoom calls. I said, you're not going to rezone us. You're not going to do any of that. And we need to understand something, and it just goes into another issue called urban design. Urban design is a overlay that is giving properties more economic hardships because it's designed by people that are non-accountable and non-electable. And that is another issue that they were going to put on my whole street, including my property. It would have been under urban design. And on urban design, that creates what they call legal non-conforming once they put it on your property. And if you don't know what that means, I think your viewers need to understand what that means. Legal non-conforming, reverse it, non-conforming to their legality of what they want the street to look like or your real estate to look like. Mm-hmm. Think about that. And I always say a joke that a gang member will tell you that they're there because they spray your property. They'll tell you that the Crips and Bloods are there. People that do urban design do not tell you. They go out and they do a quick rezoning that probably you didn't know about, and then they put it on your real estate. And when you go try to pull a permit, that's when everything starts hitting the fan.
Yeah. Wow.
And
go ahead.
I was going to tell a good story about that. Let me give you a quick story.
Sure.
business owner in near South Side wanted to do a patio. And that person was, 1 year, he thought, because his contractor buddy said he can do a patio for $10,000. That patio could be done for $10,000, rebar, what they call performance, so water setting off. You get a nice railing around the property to get in. So 1 year of recuperating chips and salsa and margaritas will recoup his cost. He does the right thing. He goes down to Fort Worth Development Services and tries to pull a permit. They look at the permit application and they say, sorry, you're in that near South Side urban design district. Well, what does that mean? Well, please go over to that non-elected, non-accountable group and give your design to them. And he doesn't think any of it. He thinks, okay, well, if City of Fort Worth tells me to do that, I'll do it. He goes and submits that plan to that non-elected, non-accountable group. Now, the contractor calls him back in about 3 weeks and says, that $10,000 cost, I can't do it anymore for $10,000. The restaurant owner thinks, okay, maybe a little bit more because they might want some design things. So what does it cost? $35,000.
Wow.
Why? It's not about the concrete. It's not about performance. It's about their look and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Their look and feel for the railing, the way that they want the railing done, the way they want the wood, the lettering done on their property, your property. It's your property, but they are going to help you design that property to their standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the problem. Now, let me give you the fraud about that. The fraud is it's going to take him about 3 or 4 years to recuperate that cost. He gets a knock at the door, and the guy at the door says, I saw that you were going to have the economic hardship, that you got to do that patio. It's going to cost you a lot, $35,000. I'll pay you that $35,000 now and your restaurant right now for what the cost is. Why wait? He thinks. Oh, go ahead and sell. He sells. What he doesn't know, that guy that knocked on the door that bought his property is friends with everybody on that urban design near Southside board. That's the fraud. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going on. Been going on for many years in Fort Worth. So that right there, and that legal non-conforming group, if they don't like you, if you're not in their little wheelhouse of friends, give me an example, Jeff. Do you know that near Southside group has a country club membership fee? A membership fee to be a part of their group. And they're using tax dollars. It's called a tip. When I think you guys have addressed a tax and criminal financing district before. Mm-hmm. They're using a TIF to their own economic choices. That group controls millions upon millions of dollars of tax money. And then if you don't play with their little world or their little strategy, you're out. And they go out and they use their friends to go get you out. And that's a problem that we face in Fort Worth.
Yeah. So I guess final question, what's your plan for the property at this point?
My plan for the property right now is just going through the guidelines. I'm already accomplished the COA, which is a certificate of appropriation. I accomplished that on my own, and I got it accomplished as of July 11th by Fort Worth Historic Department. That's a huge accomplishment by myself. Now we're going forward. We're going to develop the property with the strategies that we're setting forth to do a quality product. I know down the road what my value is going to be. So I know that mixed use is on the whole property for my future use. But right now, my ultimate goal is to develop the property into something that's going to be commercially viable. One of the programs I'm looking into is for veterans to live there and go into technology in the tech space. There's a program that is coming out of Congress that I help work on that provides 100% of their housing. And then I have a commercial property, zoned property that I can build the training facilities for the training providers. So I'm looking at doing that for the whole community. That'll be an economic engine, not just for myself, but also for the whole city of Fort Worth, which is also the number one area for the Department of Defense funded area. So we're huge. That street is commercial, commercial viable street. My goal is to make a quality product. The fight is down the road. I have no doubt about it. There's going to be a legal fight about this. And I believe 100% that I am in the perfect position for that legal fight because of who I am, because of my voice in the community, of what I've accomplished so far. And so I'm looking forward to that legal fight. I'm not shying away from it.
Yeah. Well, it's just an incredible story of government imposed barriers that you faced. And again, you didn't even know you'd face them when you bought the property. So really appreciate you joining us, Stephen, and best of luck to you as you continue to try and develop this property.
Can I tell you one more thing?
Sure.
You guys inspired, American for Prosperity, your group inspired me. I created a website called realjusticeusa.com.
Okay.
And it's going to be an advocacy board to help developers like myself and other developers going out through the restrictions of municipalities and government.
That's great. That's great. So you're taking action. What's it called again?
realjusticeusa.com.
Great.
So real stands for real estate. Justice, of course, stands for justice for all of us. And then USA for all of the USA.
Great.
So yeah.
Okay.
realjusticeusa.com.
Good. Well, folks can go there and learn more about how to fight back about some of these municipal problems that are created by, as you said, unelected bureaucrats, people who aren't accountable to the voters. So thanks for joining us, Stephen.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Monica, as well. Thank you.
You bet. All right. Well, this is just another example, as we see, of just government imposed barriers. The government, whether it's at the federal, state, local level, imposing these barriers that people have to overcome. And sometimes you don't even know you have to overcome them. And there you go. Look, liberty and freedom, easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there, defend freedom and defend liberty. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.